Um, Welcome to the Lunch at Home talk for Black Matter. This might be one of our last Lunch at Home talks. The demasking has begun, as the Gazette Times had as a big thing. So welcome to the talk of Black Matter, a show curated by Tammy Jo Wilson. Please wave, Tammy. And she pulled this show together. We'll have two talks with it. Today, mostly about art, facilitated by me. And next week, same time, facilitated by Tammy Jo, what it means to be an artist of color. And I have to let you know that there are a lot of gray areas here. We will talk about subject matter, and that is obviously a crossover area. The show is up now, of course, and it will end on June 19th, when Tammy will come and back it up again, and we'll move to the next. But for now, it's here. There are 5 artists: Jamila Clarke, Jamila, wave, and Jeremy Okai Davis, Jeremy, wave, Christine Miller, Christine.
I don't see Christine.
What's that?
I don't see her. Is she
okay? Okay. And Maya Vivas, which we don't see here today either. And then Mosley, Wotta from Bend, who also can wave. So welcome to you all. And I would like to explain how we do this. I ask a couple of basic questions, and then a conversation hopefully rolls out of that. And the audience, please stick up your hand or put something in the chat, and I'll see if I remember to look at that. Double functioning, doing 2 things at the same time. It's not my strength. So here we go. I'm turning on the stopwatch so I can see how long we're blabbering around here. Jeremy, tell me a little bit about your art background. How did this happen?
How did art happen? Well, I've been making art my whole life. I'm from North Carolina. Grew up in mostly a basketball family, but art was always kind of first and foremost. Like, even through all my attempts at becoming a college basketball and eventually professional basketball player, art kind of lingered in the background. When I went off to junior college to play basketball, that ended up not working out for me as well as I'd hoped. And that kind of shifted my focus. So I left the school that I was at in North Carolina and went back to UNC Charlotte and joined the art program. And from that point forward, I was just kind of invested in making art. After graduating, I kind of tooled around Charlotte a little bit, trying to make some stuff happen art-wise, and had a few shows, but nothing that really grabbed a hold. And after a while, it felt like I was kind of just spinning my wheels as an artist. And I had a friend that was living in Portland. So I came to visit in 2006 with no anticipation of this being the place that I ended up. But just kind of fell in love with Portland on that trip in 2006. And 6 months later, I moved out here. From 2007 to around 2011 was when I like to think of it as like almost like second college, or almost like grad school for me, because when I got to Portland, I met a lot of artists that were kind of in the same place that I was in, as far as like just trying to get a foothold in their career and try to figure out what they were trying to do. So that time, from like those first 4 years, I was really just trying to figure out what I was doing with my art. and meeting people, meeting curators, other artists, showing anywhere I could, cafes, coffee shops, renting spaces on my own to show work. And so just did that for a while. And then around 2013, 2012, it seemed like people started paying a little bit more attention to the work. So I was getting offered shows, started showing around Portland, getting my name out there a little bit. I did some graphic design and some illustration work that got my name out a little bit more. And I'd say in 2015, 2016, with some of the public art I've done, that's when things really started rolling for me. I did a mural downtown Portland. I did a project actually at the Lottie B. Harris Cultural Center at Oregon State. Did a project for U of O. And from that point forward, things kind of started rolling pretty nicely for me.
For those here in Corvallis, where is the OSU mural? And
so the one in OSU at Oregon State is at the Lonnie B. Harris Cultural Center. It's not a mural, it's a large scale painting. And then I did 25 like really small portraits, or not really small, like 12 by 12 portraits for them. So that's at the Cultural Center that they built a few years back. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I really should do it. Everybody remember this, and I should do a step back and talk with Tammy a little bit about what the philosophy of her idea of pulling this show together was. When the Art Center started thinking about doing a show of Black artists, it was about a year ago, and suddenly the Black Lives Matter movement started to explode. And I also realized that I was not the one who should be curating a show of Black artists since I have no connection. I'm white. And so I asked Tammy to do that. So Tammy, we talked a little bit, we emailed a little bit back and forth of how you and we saw this show happening. So please give us a little bit of an outline what you were thinking of.
Sure, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, so when Hester approached me about the show, I think the first thing that I thought of was really wanting to do an exhibition, the show that I've always wanted to be in and wanted to see as, a Black female artist. There's so many exhibitions out there that my work doesn't fit, or it's having different conversations that just doesn't quite make sense for the direction of my work. And I was seeing that for a lot of other artists. So my idea was to have a show that could represent Black artists, that would give them the freedom to really talk about what is interesting and important to them in their work, and not force them to talk about the pain and the trauma of the Black experience, and especially everything going on right now. Like, they can, if that's what their work is about, if they want to, but they don't have the obligation of being the person that steps up in the gallery to have that conversation. So we could just be artists and show our work about our lives and our experiences, just as a whole artist person, if that makes sense. And I was like, that's the show that I want to be in. I want somebody to see the totality of my expression and my life experience, not just based on one aspect of who I am. And so I was like, that's the show that I want to make happen, so that we can, fully experience what they want to
So
share.
how did you select the artists? Because I think most of these artists are invited, and we should also say this show is going to travel to the Chehalem Art Center, where there will be a few more artists included, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did it through a multi-level process. So there was invitation, there was nominations. So people, if somebody knew somebody and they're like, this artist really, should check this show out, and I think they're great, you should look them up, you could nominate somebody. And then there was a call, so artists could apply, so I could discover and find new artists that maybe I didn't know that were outside of my circle. So I was able to invite the talented people that maybe just didn't hear about it, didn't know, or just needed to be invited. And then the invitation, I think, really allowed the greater community to get involved and think about, who do I know, you know? And so I did get a lot of people nominating. Jeremy got a lot of nominations, I have to say, though. Just so you know, you were invited. I think Jeremy was one of the first people I asked, but everybody, your name got dropped a lot. So, and Maya's as well. So it was interesting to see like who the community like knows and is out there, as well as me just doing the research and finding people like Mo out in Bend who might not have seen the call for art, you know, and really seeing the great work that he's doing and bringing him into this exhibition. And so for me, it was really important to take the time to try and look at the state of Oregon and look at the greater community and find those people. Because sometimes calls for it, unless you're intentionally looking for it, you know, and we're not always doing that. We're just not.
Yeah.
Or you don't have the means. Technically, computer, you just miss it because of something happening in your life. Anyway, so that was that process. And once the show really started coming together and I started finding the artists and everything that was kind of happening in the world as it is right now, I really wanted to expand it, include more people. And then Chehalem Cultural Center, which is up in Newberg, Oregon, if you've ever been up there, they have a really beautiful space called the Parish Gallery. And so they invited me to do the show again up there. That space is a bit larger. It's just a different kind, it's a whole different community. So it's going to take all of the great things that the Art Center started and really invested in me and trusted me to do this and gave me this opportunity. And it really gave me the ability to like bring it and take it to the next level. So thank you, Art Center, for that. I think we got to definitely give you guys credit for making this all possible, because I wouldn't have been able to do this if you wouldn't have, you know, come to me. And I really, I value that opportunity.
Yeah, so that is great. I think one of the things a community organization like the Art Center should be doing is creating opportunities for artists and an audience and get those two together. You mentioned the great work that Mo is doing. So Mo, could you tell us a little bit about how you got to be in this interesting combination that you have of being a music performer and a painter?
Yeah,
and a poet too, and a poet and a writer.
Yeah, I think that we used to call sort of more the Renaissance thing. I don't think is nearly as, I think it's much more common these days where folks are good at a lot of things. I was just smiling because I was watching the person walking up to the art, but it started like in a tiptoe. I don't know if they can hear me, but I watched them test the infrastructure of the building, like if that first step would hold them as they were like moving closer, which was
I'm not giving any guarantees. This is an old building. That is,
right, yeah,
that is old growth fir, and it's very soft. Anyway.
I'm like really high on metaphors at the moment. Then if we're going to talk about like the Doug fir and the building itself, maybe not being able to hold it, and the tiptoeing into the uncomfortable conversation, but the call to go to the uncomfortable conversation, and then they're there and they're observing and they haven't died yet. They're still experiencing, you know, like all that stuff. Just with that one person walking up some old wood. I don't remember what the question was, but I do remember you said something about the cross section between these different mediums. And I think more and more as there are distinctions between, it's not so much that it's just the stuff is coming through, and sometimes it needs to come through as music, and then it isn't disconnected from the painting. So one thing is speaking to the other. And then for where I'm at with this, in this personal process artistically, that's very helpful when I'm looking at the cohort of other artists that I'm working with, because it is this conversation, even if we don't know each other, that's bouncing back and forth. The paintings are talking to each other when nobody's in the gallery. There's a kind of communication and community that happens. And that is one of the best aspects of this thing that we've called Blackness, that we can really own, that we can share. One of many, but one of the best things of saying, I'm pretty sure I'm from this place, but I also know I'm deeply disconnected from it, right? Like and in this way, I can find my community more clearly. So it's both inviting the confusion, the mystery, and all those kind of things along with the clarity, but it's not supposed to just be one or the other. You know, as the joke goes, it's a pain in the neck trying to see every angle, right? So so I see the same thing with the, you know, if it's writing or painting or music or performance or whatever, I see the same thing in those relationships as I do with the other artists, which is also helpful as we get put in these grand royales of grants, where I have to see peers and allies and would-be friends and family as direct competition that I need to win out over. So when I'm in those positions also too, wherever I'm at in those positions, how can I think about working with those other folks? Because like Tammy Jo pointed out, a lot of times we don't even know where the opportunities are. We don't even know that we would be qualified. And there's just oftentimes, unfortunately, an assumption, whatever your demographic is, you can see some area where the assumption is, oh, that's not for me. Oh, that's a gentleman's club. Oh, that's not for me, whatever it is. And that's a real tragedy, because oftentimes it's the folks who are nerding out quietly in some weird little corner somewhere that have some really beautiful stuff. And that is an advantage that Oregon has. We are full of tiny little corners and corridors that aren't Portland, that aren't Ashland, that aren't Bend or whatever, that are bubbling with creativity, that are speaking directly to the old wood in the infrastructure of the old church that's now the arts or whatever it is. And we need to find those folks, like, and we need, and in a way that isn't like going to save them so that we can bring them to the big city, right? Like there's also, we have to let go of that part too, you know? So anyway, it goes on and on.
I agree. And what you're saying, we need to find those folks. I think having a show like this at the Art Center is that communication. That's the finding. Like putting artists like all of us together and promoting it, having this talk is a way that people can find us, but we can also reach out and communicate with people that may not know that this type of thing is happening.
The interesting thing is, I think that, you know, talking about, and here we're not talking about how to make art, but like I said, gray areas. The interesting thing is that although these are serious and not necessarily happy things that we're talking about, that the conversation that is going on in this room currently feels really optimistic and lighthearted. And I'm a little surprised, but what they call pleasantly surprised. I'd like to go to Jamila and hear about her and her photographs, which are those little specks there. Oh, I feel like a weatherman now. Anyway, Jamila, tell us a little bit about your medium and how you got to this.
So my medium is photography. I have a background in theater and photography and filmmaking. So a lot of storytelling is kind of the key focus of my work whenever I create. I don't do filmmaking so much anymore. So photography kind of became a way to make like mini film stills of these ideas, so that I try to pack a lot of concepts and visuals into something. So even though it's one image, you kind of get this really interesting story that I sometimes try to leave a little open-ended so people can kind of pull their own assumptions from it to some degree, but also have my own particular narrative that I've put into them. And I think a lot of my theater work kind of influences it. So like I spent a lot of time with costuming and set work and finding locations. And so part of it's just, I want to tell these really interesting stories with people who aren't necessarily seen a lot. Like I think that was one of the things that drove me to do self-portraiture, as well as working with models that look like me, because so often, at least in that type of photography, it was a very white landscape. And I felt like that was just kind of not fair. Like Black people can experience fantasy stories, they can have surreal stories. So I like to kind of play around with the idea of magical realism because it's a really good way to tackle something that's a lot more complicated, but still deal with it in a way that is accessible to more people. So that kind of informs a lot of what I like to create. Yeah.
When I look at the work of you three, it strikes me that Mo's work is very spontaneous and immediate, especially the work part of the work he has here. And Jamila, yours is very planned because you have to get all those things together.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, you mentioned you, like myself, never heard of Junius Kellogg, of which you have 2 portraits here. And I looked him up, and it's a very interesting and nice person. So what does spontaneity play in your work? Jeremy and Jamila, would you like to address that? And then Mo, you can contradict me in my assumption that your work is entirely spontaneous.
For our work, the spontaneity really comes in the beginning stages, with how the backgrounds usually start with kind of abstract, and I put on some music and I just kind of zone out and go for it with the backgrounds. The figures and the subjects and the content in the work is less spontaneous. That's a little bit more thought out. I have a sketchbook that I draw out everything, get everything prepared before I start painting. But the actual act of painting is kind of the spontaneous part, and kind of seeing how each brushstroke reacts to the next brushstroke. That's where the spontaneity comes in for me. But yeah, most everything I paint, I kind of know what it's going to look like before I finish. But there's always room for spontaneity or improvisation once I start. So yeah, it's like a mix of both. There's a mix of spontaneity and continuity that kind of goes into my work.
Jeremy, sorry, I was going to ask Jeremy, for your work, does the graphic elements and some of the color choices, does that come in during the piece, or do you have that planned out before you get to, you know?
I have a general idea what colors I want to use, but I'd say once the painting starts again, that's where the spontaneity and I make decisions on the fly. I knew for the one of Junius that's the half portrait with the lines underneath, I knew that I wanted those lines. I wasn't sure what colors I wanted those to be, and the colors kind of came into play after I finished the first piece with the more waist up. Because I wanted the 2 pieces to speak to each other, so I kind of integrated some of the same color schemes into both, and that goes back to my I'm a graphic designer as well, so that goes back to my graphic design influence and just trying to make things communicate and get across to the viewer a little bit more succinctly.
And Jamila, do you plan the story?
I think the inspiration sometimes might be spontaneous, like just a passing thought. But then I start planning it a little bit more and at least figure out what I kind of want. I might sketch out a thumbnail and then kind of seek out what I'm looking to kind of create that look. So if it's out in a field, if it's going to be inside of a studio, do I need to get backdrops? Do I need to find costumes? But once I kind of get into the actual shooting, sometimes there's a lot of spontaneity that actually happens in that, because I can't always control the environment. Sometimes there's crazy weather. And in one of them, the one with the woman with all the letters, that one actually kind of came together thanks to spontaneity. I didn't know it was going to be a windy, stormy day. That was just pure coincidence. And at first I was just going to have these letters just kind of strewn about, but then the wind picked up and it just kind of gave it this perfect look, and I was able to capture that as that was happening. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna blow all the letters around. So it's it kind of took on an even more dramatic flair to what was already. I mean, I probably would have added some of it, but it was everything came together at once and made it happen. So I was like, yes, oh, this is what I wanted. Thank you, nature. So it can kind of have
life without happy accidents.
Yeah.
Mo, so you did this wall behind us on what we call the stage. And people have asked me, did he plan that out? And you know, I have an art history background, so I make up stuff all the time. And I said, oh yeah, he planned that out a little bit, but in the end, it was very spontaneous, because there's I think you got frustrated by the piano, and there's a reference on the piano there. So what made you want to do a direct work on the wall, which scares every small organization curator, because now we're going to have to repaint the wall and will it cover it? So how did you make that decision? I want to do something directly on the wall, and I want to do it, you know, not on a big panel and bring it. Well, that's.
There's a few things that came to mind. One is, I think from my perspective, the truly courageous thing, and this is, you know, watch out, because I do like to flatter, because I do like what it does to like let people's shoulders down from their ears, but I mean it sincerely, that the other two artists that we have here, Jamila and Jeremy, are actually doing the more courageous thing in terms of the craft of it, where the planning out and knowing what it's going to be and allowing for the improvisation to happen, like as a force majeure, whatever, nature gets involved or whatever, is actually a more courageous thing, because in the sense that if we were to actually rely on the artists right now on the screen to build a bridge, a literal bridge from one place to the other, we wouldn't want to rely on Mosley Water to build the bridge, because I'm not to actually walk across, and also to have the vision and to trust the vision and to articulate that, like that takes a tremendous leap. There's something intentionally pre-formal in the stuff that I'm doing, childlike, in the sense of I want to start with some really basic techniques to see if I can talk about some more sophisticated things. And I also really appreciate in the show, and as you can see in Tammy's work, for example, as well, like it isn't always about the Black artist talking about Black, blah, blah, blah. And not to blah, 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 to minimize it, but that is so often what we're called to do. Like, can you come and speak? And as if there isn't more to, you know, we're going to invite Black people to talk about how we are not a monolithic people, but only for that one event, and, you know, whatever. So, but the thing with what I do like about exploring those topics is what evolves up out of them. So I'm quite clear on the fact that all these race issues that we are saying are issues, and sort of the surprise and the kind of optimism that you were talking about, or the hopefulness or promise or whatever that you see in some of our paintings, represents the fact that this is just a gateway into dealing with a lot of our disparities or whatever, and we're going to be transcending through them, you know. The whole idea, with that in mind, the whole idea of painting on the wall is that, like in the most basic of jokes, it's a white wall, I put color on top of it, and then we're going to paint it white again. But then this is, again, just what we do with histories, because before there was that church that is now the art center, there was the tree, and that tree got chopped down, and who was on the land when the tree was standing up, and on it goes. So this is what we do with our information and our histories. So it's not, and I think it's an inevitable thing. It's not always a malicious, you know, kill the Indian, save the man kind of it just is also time. So and so we also have to respect like the natural course of that. So there is spontaneity, there is thoughtfulness, and what I'm also hearing is a through line through the artists that are speaking on to their work at the moment is that it's not that those things don't occur, it's to sort of what degree and at what time during the course of creating the thing. Yeah. So yeah.
I want to make a switch here and talk a little bit about artists that are not on the screen here, because I don't want to ignore them, but obviously it's harder to get them into the conversation. This is work by Maya Vivas, who I should mention is one of the founders of Ori Gallery in Portland, which really promotes queer and trans artists of color. But if we look at this work, this is stoneware and it's very sculpted. I don't really dare get the laptop closer than that. So you will all have to come in person and look at this, because you always have to come and look at art in person anyways. The screen gives you information, being there gives you the experience. But anyway, she has a title that is /apostrophe blots !r slash again. So it's a very cryptic title, and Tammy is going to tell us a little bit more.
So yeah, you're right. The way that she titled these pieces with the weird lettering, at first I didn't quite see it, but after staring at her images and her titles and thinking about her work and looking at her website, the titles actually do spell out the names of the different organs of the body. She's just done it in a really unique way so that you don't get it right off the bat. So that you have to kind of look at the title, think about it, and kind of come at it from the side. But each one of these pieces, it is an organ of the body, which I think is totally fascinating, because when I first experienced her work, which I don't believe it was these pieces, I felt like she had literally sculpted like a piece of me. Like I connected with it so viscerally as an organic object, that I felt like yes, like you did it. You like, I connect with this. I want to touch it and hold it and take it home. And so then I think the one that she zoomed in now is there's a heart, and I think the other one is called stomach, but I can't quite remember specifically. And so
Oh
these,
yeah, this is stomach and this is heart.
yeah. So they're,
and the blood ones are the other two. And to me, this is so scary. This is called blood. And the word blood, B-L-A-D, in Dutch is leaf. So I looked at it like that. But and I picked up on the heart one, but the stomach I hadn't realized before. And maybe it's bladder, who knows? It's stoneware, so they're unique pieces. And one of the things that she does says about it is, being an artist who started a gallery for queer and trans artists of color, she is not without politics. It's, well, although it looks at first sight totally not about what you are, she feels that there is this push and pull in the markings. She pulled with her hands physically, and that sort of stands for that conflict in life on how to be an artist, a queer artist of color. I think that's sort of a double whammy. And then this is a quote, "The beautiful, carnal, and heartbreaking nature of clay is a direct reflection of human nature." So Cynthia, who is a ceramic artist, or a potter, I should say, there's two, she's the potter can. I think you can relate to this, I assume. There's work in Corvallis, it has nothing to do with this, that are markings for the riverfront, and there you see that hand marking in there too, which is why you have to go and see it in person. The other artist that is not here is Christine Miller. And Tammy, could you say something about her? I think I'm brave enough to walk to so you can actually see what she's doing.
Yeah, so the one that we're looking at right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Hester, but I believe the title is The Intentional Definition of Black.
Intentional, yeah.
Did I get it
Black
right? Okay.
definitions, whatever, you know.
Yeah. And
And
this
it's-
one,
it's
solar power.
solar power, yeah.
Yeah. So these pieces, this is me talking about it. This isn't direct quotes from her. This is more based on my experiences of her work. These pieces to me speak about kind of the overlaps and confusions of when we talk about and think about the word Black and the definition of Black as a color or an experience or a thing like in our world, and then when that overlaps with like a person and that label that is put on a person, and then the stereotypes of Blackness in our society over the last, I don't know, 50 years during her lifetime. Well, she's not 50. Over the last recent years. And so thinking about navigating our lives through those stereotypes and through what it means to exist under this kind of experience in, yeah. And then solar power is more of a, I feel like it's thinking about that same kind of energy, but more like in an internal way. The different color spaces, they're actually like pieces of felt. And I know there are colors that I feel like she connected with more emotionally, internally, as opposed to like thinking of like a surface idea of Blackness. Yeah.
Yeah, so she says, I became my own preference. It says there is no grand story, no exact moment in time. But one day I woke up and I became my own preference. Black is beautiful. My black is the color of sun. Where she plays with the yellow, which we usually make the sun in our drawings, and the black of the black felt. And there are different sorts of, as you as artists all know, different materials that you make black with, and black felt is one of those really deep black colors. A totally different question. What gets you into the studio in the morning? What,
Or in the afternoon or in the middle of the night.
or what gets you in the studio? Well, and some artists work from 9 to 5 and are very disciplined, and others not. So who of you would like to respond? Jeremy.
Well, me personally, I mean, I've been connected to art so long and making art so long that it's like just part of my being. Like I couldn't, like I have to, you know, like there's no way around it. If I don't, like I don't feel like myself anymore. So it's just a matter of having to do it. But then also just in just in general, like I make art at this point to just give myself information, kind of educate myself. Like we were talking about the Junius pieces, those 2 paintings. Like I found out about him on just this random documentary that I watched. And in finding out about him, I wanted to explore him a little bit more, or a lot more. And the way that I explore and find out more about people is through my art. So by force of nature, I have to go in the studio to research him and find out about him, and put an image of him on canvas. And then in turn, me finding out about him and doing this research, I want to make a painting of him, put it on a wall to in hopes of making other people curious about this person that I just found out about, or people or subject that I just found out about. So it's just going to the studio is just part of who I am. It's just part of my day, part of my week, part of my life.
And Jamila, how does that, what does get you into, you're also an active graphic designer, I understand. So
Yeah.
because not everybody realizes that, but artists are one-person businesses.
Mhm. It just kind of depends. I mean, photography is kind of, it just depends on my schedule. So it tends to be whenever I can find the time, or certain seasons, because I do a lot outside. So it's like late falls kind of when I start going out and doing stuff more. So this is kind of more of my planning time unless I'm doing a lot of studio work. But otherwise it's just little things like going over work and doing the graphic side of things. So that's just kind of, I'll find like little bits of time to work on stuff.
Is it important for you to have a story sort of in your mind, and then that gets you going?
Yeah, I think every project that I work on, I try to start with an idea so I can start building off of that. Like pretty much all of these started out in just like a book of notes, and then finding like images for reference for a while. And it's almost like planning a tiny movie to some degree. And then kind of like as the, like I'll pass a place and be like, oh, that place is perfect, I have to come back here. So it'll like take time, like little steps. So it's like always like a little bit in the back of my mind, like where the next shot might happen. And some of them take forever. Like I just need that right thing and it hasn't come along yet. So it's like, I'll work on them for years if need be.
You mentioned in somewhere that when digital photography came around, you really took off.
Yeah.
But that, yet again, on the other hand, you also enjoy making handmade props,
Yeah.
such as, well, this is an interesting image with the reflection of our window in the photograph. And I can't deal with it. I can't fix that. But anyway. And so how did that work out with the making props things?
That one, I like actually just hunted for tiny houses or medium-sized houses, and came across that piece. And it actually looked like a house, because so many times they don't really look like an actual house, so that if you were to put it in scale, it doesn't look right. So that one, and then I think I actually dug up a part of my yard so that I could make the grass and the roots and all that, and put that together. It was one of the smaller kind of props I did, but it was a neat little process to put it together to try to make it look as realistic as possible.
Yeah, because you have these two.
Yeah. Then the one with the girl in the room, we actually built that room over a couple of days, a week, a month. We like had to hunt for a tiny bed, which is actually from IKEA. They sell little child-sized beds that are about right. We made a tiny door, we made tiny windows, I made tiny curtains and pillows, and we found like children's blocks that are about the right size. It was just a lot of like finding little tiny things that kind of looked like the right scale next to a human person. It was really fun because it was like people were like, oh, that room's Photoshop. I'm like, no, the whole room is real. We made it. We made a tiny room and then put our model in it.
Were there multiple photos from that set, that shot?
Yeah, there were a couple of photos from that set. I wish we had taken more because the parts of that set can't be rebuilt, and I wanted to rebuild it one last time. But yeah, it was kind of just living in our garage for a little bit, this little tiny room. Our cats tested out the tiny bed.
Have you ever done any work with film, or do you just work with photography?
I used to do that. That's what I did when I was in college. I did some filmmaking, and then it kind of fell out of it just because it's harder with you need a lot more people basically to kind of do more filmmaking. So I'm starting to kind of get back into it a little bit again because I miss it. But this is kind of my like miniature way of doing it.
So we're going to quickly give Mo a reason, or not a reason, an opportunity to say what gets him in the studio or the art center to make his work?
There's some definite similarities there, or just to say same. There's also, I recognize in what Jamila was saying, there is something seasonal as well. Sometimes there's just different periods of the year. I think maybe I first noticed it with like writers, where like at a competition or something, it would sort of wane during the summer, but fall and winter, introspective maybe, I don't know, going inside because of the cold weather and whatever. Sometimes I'm kind of a rigid, like up every day and go and do the work, even if I'm not necessarily enjoying it, but there's enough, like I know enough, I do like a lot of very tiny little things.
So how a pianist would do finger play.
Yeah. There's no upcoming fight, but do the sit-ups, do the push-ups, stay in shape, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, and that's good. And then sometimes it is fun. And I think one thing we all enjoyed is just getting swept off your feet by the inspiration. You create something that is greater than you, which is very much like a, relationship with a child or whatever. And you get to sort of marvel at it, but you also know you get to put your name on it maybe, but that it's not really yours. It in a sense came from you. And my answers have been longer, so I'll stop there. So like I think is the reason.
Yeah, there are tons of questions that I would like to ask you. When did you feel you could be an artist, but also who you think your audience is, and who do you would like your audience to be? Maybe that is more in the crossover that Tammy is going to talk about. Tammy, I was going to ask you, we're sort of running towards, yes.
Could I say one thing to that? I just recently found a way to start watching this show called Loiter Squad, which I don't need to go into especially, but there was one part where they're doing a CD signing, music record signing or whatever. And like out of all the fans, there's one black guy that walks into the room, and everybody in the musical group is black, and they start applauding and cheering, and they're like, it's the first black guy, and they start screaming. So when you're asking a little bit about like what you would like your fan base to be, sometimes I saw in that moment a very like Oregon experience, which isn't always great to be like, why am I getting applauded or whatever, but there was something I resonated with me.
Yeah. Tammy, is there something you would like to address about not so much being an artist of color, but about the artwork? And you alluded in the beginning of this is a show I would like to be in, but what did we not, of the many things we didn't talk about, is there something that you would really want to put out there?
That's a big question.
Well, I didn't mean it to be very big. I meant
yeah. I think for me, in thinking about the show, and you're talking about like audiences and who do you want the audience to be and who do you think the audience is, which isn't necessarily the same thing. I think in my goal, my curatorial kind of thought process with the show is really just about acknowledging and seeing these artists for the totality of what they are. And so often I've had like a personal experience where I was sitting across from the table from another curator, and they said they can't find any good Black artists in Oregon. And she was literally staring across at me, a Black artist, and said, I can't find any good. And
you were not supposed to take this person.
It hit me right here, and it has been memorable, and it has been like a call to action for me of like, this is not acceptable. And so this opportunity was allowed me to take a step towards undoing that and saying, here we are, we deserve to be seen, we're here. Like, they're just not, are they not looking like, anyway, I don't want to get too emotional about it, but
Yeah. Well, the NAACP in Corvallis is one of the co-sponsors of this show. And I don't remember who it was, but one of them said, if only we could be more visible, if only we could be seen. And I think that is as far as the, what's the word? Where ambition of the Art Center goes, is giving an opportunity to be seen. We're not solving anything here, obviously. We have a very small amount of time, and
can I do one more little thing on that topic?
yes.
So another thing that I've been noticing as we've been in Oregon, they're trying to have more shows that include diverse artists of various backgrounds and all of that. That, you know, there'll be the one Black artist in the show, but sometimes I'll go and you don't even know who it is. So it's like, if I was a young person, if I was a 13-year-old girl and I wanted to go to a show and I was like, well, I know there's, you know, diverse people, and like, how am I going to see someone like me making work? Because I go to these shows and I don't even know who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes they're there, but you just don't even know.
Just so you're saying, naming it, being very clear about who is here, makes it already more visible. It should really,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. This is an aside, but the interesting thing is the exhibition committee that I've worked with has always been dominated by women, because it's a time issue. And the Art Center has always, or in the time that I've worked here, exhibited a fair amount of women artists. And we never did that intentionally. There were a couple of years there were only women. And this year we had a juror for the Around Oregon annual exhibition who identifies as they, them, and V. Maldonado. So that this is already a very upfront clarity. And we got a different group of artists submitting. And so that is one of the things that we need to think about too, is not only who are we showing, but who are we asking to make the choices for us, which is one of the reasons why we asked Tammy Jo to do it, and not me and the exhibition committee, where there are only 1 or 2 people of color on there. So this is one of those crossover things that we can talk about next week as well. So I want to scale back a little bit and talk about art again, and ask my seemingly silly, but still interesting question of, if money and space was not something you think about, what would be the artwork you would like to own? And I'd like to know from you too, Tammy. So Jeremy, go for it. You
like if I could buy any artist's work?
Anything. It could be the Sixtine Chapel, or it could be a little piece of jewelry that you can always have with you.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of artists that I've admired for a long time, but I guess I'd probably say anything that Kerry James Marshall has ever made. He's probably my favorite artist right now, and has been for a long time. So it's more, and I mean, obviously it's a monetary thing. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have millions of dollars, but also don't have a lot of space. So I guess I would have to invest in a larger home to with a lot of wall space that I could put some of his larger pieces on the wall. But I love Kerry James Marshall, so anything that he's done, larger or small.
And why is
Why
that-
him?
Yeah.
You know, my art changed, I'd say, in the last like 5 or 6 years. I've known about him for a long time, but I saw his show in Chicago, the Mastery Show, and listened to him, just some YouTube videos of him talking about how he approaches work, and he approaches his work in a way that I never really thought about, and I currently do it in more of like a research way, a way of educating myself and educating others. So I just am like forever indebted to.
So he's a big influence.
Just a really big influence, yeah. Just indebted to that advice that he gave me, but without knowing that he was giving me in particular advice. So he just means a lot to me as an artist and as a person. So yeah, he'd be the person that I'd want to collect if I was a collector per se.
Tammy, you're unmuted and ready.
So when I purchase art, and I try to purchase art regularly, I do it for, I think it's a slightly different reason, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other people will identify with it. Is I don't think I would purchase the art of like a big famous artist that I can't afford. I would purchase as much art as I can from the artists that I am around, because I always want to purchase their work and to show them how much I respect their work and how much I want to support their work and say, I see you, keep doing what you're doing. I can hear what you're saying. And so to be able to have that opportunity to see an artist's work and be like, yes, I want to show them that I support them, and be able to do that by purchasing. So that's what I would do. If I was a millionaire, I would buy one piece from every artist in the show and every artist in the next show, and see those people and be like,
okay.
because I know how, as an
that
artist, how
idea.
amazing that feels. Somebody's like, yeah,
Yeah.
they gave their hard-earned money to like own something.
One of our previous directors actually did that. She bought a piece out of each and every show in the 7 or 8 years that she was here. Jamila.
It's always so hard for me to pick that kind of thing. There's so many things. If I had nothing was an object. I mean, like, I'm kind of like in between the two things. I'm like, I kind of feel Tammy Jo. Like, I have a lot of friends who are illustrators, like a lot of them. And illustration is something that's always really influenced me a lot. I think it's because it's not bound by actual realism. You can kind of do whatever you want in a painting or a drawing. And I like that. And then I like to kind of try to recreate that with my own work. So I always look at that for influence. So I know I would definitely want to just buy art from all of the amazing illustrators that I've ever come across and just fill my house with it. I do it in a very tiny scale right now.
Good for you.
It's hard. It's so expensive. But I know, like, if I'm just gonna be like, whatever, I'm like, the entire like ceiling of Versailles, it's just really pretty. I'm like, I remember just being there as a kid and just like, well, not a kid, teenager, and just laying down and just like looking up at the ceiling is pretty epic. But that's just being ridiculous, just for the sake of just whatever. I can do whatever I want.
Mo.
I think I would do something similar in the idea of like investing in like an artist who's a lifer, and even though it's not the perfect model, but like that patron model, being able to be that for somebody and provide that kind of consistency, I think is really great. And then like, if I'm all about having all this money, then maybe I'm also just investing in somebody who I know is going to eventually turn a profit, right? Like Jay-Z's got his whole breakdown in 444. He's talking about the investment of art, and you all think it's bougie. That's fine, whatever. Try and give you $1 million game for $9.99. I think there's something to that, and I also think like we more and more we'll see. I think more and more we'll see less and less of the like meteoric giant pedestal whatever as we sort of see an equilibrium. I think there'll still be really big artists, but I don't think it will be.
But you gotta go inside.
Yeah, like this kiddo here, like whoever this kiddo is.
Oops, sorry,
Like it'll
guys.
be more of that interrupting the very important conversation that we
Sorry.
have. Yeah, no, like no apology. I'm just saying I think that's what's valuable right now. I mean, and again, beyond just the Black artists, that's part of the underlying thing is like, where are the folks that we're not seeing? And does everybody need to be the multi-millionaire? Or can you have like a decent living as a working artist and like show people that that's a viable thing to do without having to feel like
Absolutely.
you're giving away something that is invaluable, you know?
You don't have to be rich and famous to be valuable.
Yeah, to be wealthy and well-known, right? You don't have to be rich and famous to be wealthy and well-known.
Nobody, and this doesn't go for artists, but for people that have 9-to-5 jobs, nobody ever thinks, oh, I wish I'd worked more. People think, oh, I wish I'd been more with my family. Anyway, I think your choices are really interesting. The artist that is in the Corinne Woodman Gallery currently, Erin McAdams, she wanted the Detroit Institute of Art, all of it, to be able to share. I think it's interesting that you're very much into sharing. I think the owning part is important because that is what you choose to feed your soul. And I think in the art, that is what art is about in the end. It needs to feed your soul, however your soul gets fed, by beauty or by political engagement or whatever. I'm moving around because I'm moving around the audience. That is very, very nice to see that there's audience. Anyway, I would like to thank all of you being here. I'm excited that you are here. Tammy, thank you so much for pulling these artists together.
Thank you for inviting me to do this.